Hello everyone, this is Mandeep Singh Shekhawat and today I'm back with another video where we'll be discussing Uber's settlement accounting system architecture. So we already had a one video created where we discussed around a unified checkout page and it was also related to the payment system. In this video specifically, we will be talking about how the reconciliation system works. We will definitely talk about what it actually means if you have like no context around how payment systems are designed. But like to start with, we will go with the basic terminology, uh, and then later on we will move ahead with the architecture, how this is designed, how Uber does it. And this our entire discussion is based on this particular blog, streamlining financial precision, Uber's advanced settlement accounting system. So the title is pretty big, but the idea is that how the reconciliation system works basically. Okay, I will share the this blog link with you on the video description. So let's get started. Now, as always, I have created some notes so that I don't forget stuff which I have to cover in this video. So as I said, we will first of all we will go with some terminology, like what is the terminology or like what are the terms you should be aware of so that you can make best out of this video. So the first one is the payment or transaction. What we mean by a payment. So payment is basically you are moving amount from account A to account B. Okay. So let's say I am passing or I am transferring amount 100 from my account which is in let's say SBI bank, okay, and to your account which is in let's say SDFC bank account. So this is a particular one transaction, okay. Now this transaction can be corresponding to, or it could be as simple as a single bank transfer, or it could be in correspondence to let's say you are buying some service, okay. So in context of Uber, let's say you are booking a ride and then you are transferring some amount from your account via UPI to Uber's account basically, okay. So that's what we mean by a transaction. And for every transaction, okay, every transaction has some details which should always be present. Like if I say that this is a transaction, what information it will have. So one is amount. What is the amount I am transferring, okay. Without without amount you cannot have a transaction. Another thing is where is this amount transferred from, and when then where it is credited to. So basically your debit and then your credit, okay. Then there are some additional information which are, you can say, useful for enrichment of or like identification of this particular transaction uniquely. uh, some of the details like some unique identifiers, okay. So the identifiers could be specific to a bank, okay. So every banking entity here keeps a unique transaction reference at their end. There is one reference which is unique across the entities, so that reference can be used by any of the systems to figure out, yeah, this is the transaction which is processed by my system. Another thing is identifier is generally kept by that system specifically. So let's say Uber will have a transaction ID of their own. Then let's say Uber uses some of the payment gateways such as Razorpay, so Razorpay will have their own payment ID, okay. Similarly, if then later on it talks to particular bank, the bank will have their own transaction ID similarly, okay. So there will be certain reference IDs, transaction reference IDs, which are helpful in identifying the transaction. Another details like transaction date or like some metadata such as what this transaction is for, you can add notes, all those things. Cool. So this is the first definition we are clear with, that what is a transaction. Another thing is refund. So refund can happen like as name suggests, and you might be aware of this definitely. Refund is basically the amount is reverted back. So let's say you asked for a refund that I am not happy with the services, or let's say the transaction failed, or like the amount was debited earlier, but the transaction failed eventually. So the amount is reverted back or credited back to your bank account. So that's basically a refund. Then comes the settlement. Now this settlement term is mostly used in context of your banks, or let's say your PSP is your basically payment service provider. So uh, let's say you are uh, let's take example of three entities here. You are the user, okay. I am user. Mandeep is booking a ride on Uber, and then it uses Razorpay. I'm not sure which payment gateway Uber actually uses, but let's take an example of Razorpay, okay. So we have a user, Mandeep, okay. Then we have Uber, which want to receive those funds so that they can provide the service. And then we have a payment service provider in between, a PSP in between, which is facilitating this transaction of payment transaction basically, so that that service can be availed. So in this scenario, uh, the amount amount is not transferred to Uber in real time. Okay, so like the amount will be debited from your UPI. Let's say you are using UPI with Razorpay. Okay, you were redirected to Razorpay checkout page. You added that amount, and then the amount is transferred. So at this point of time, the amount is only credited to the Razorpay. Okay, Razorpay will inform Uber that I have received the amount, and then you can transfer the service to the user. But at till this point of time, the amount is not credited to Uber's bank account. This amount is credited to Uber's bank account in bulk, because it will become like lot of a tedious process for Razorpay to pass on like each and every transaction to Uber. So what they do is they will like for, let's say, for entire day or for 2 days. So as per the settlement cycle, it is, let's say, t plus 1 or t plus 2. The entire transactions are combined into one, and then there is a bulk transfer is being made. Okay, so that's what we mean by settlement. Another thing is chargeback. Now, chargeback chargeback is used in context of when you are raising some disputes, and it's mostly like heavily used in case of credit card transactions. So let's say a transaction is carried out on your credit card. Okay, and you are not happy with the service which you are availed of. Okay, or let's say the amount was debited from your credit card, but you didn't receive that product. Okay, you didn't receive that service. You use the credit card to buy something from Amazon. Let's say you use ICICI credit card to buy something off from Amazon, but you didn't receive the product, but the amount is already debited from your credit card. So in that case, you raise a dispute, that you raise a transaction dispute. So this is basically called as chargeback, and this chargeback can be either accepted by the banking entity, or it can be declined by the banking entity. So if you want to if you want like a very short definition, you can say dispute is kind of a chargeback. And let's say if it is declined by the merchant or like the banking entity, you can always re-raise the dispute again, that I'm not happy with the resolution. So basically it is done in two steps, which is pre-arbitration and arbitration. First you raise pre-arbitration, and then again if it's declined, then you can again raise it, which is called arbitration. If it's declined after arbitration as well, then you can't have that money. So these are the basic terms you should be aware of, I mean, so that you get most out of this video. Cool. We already discussed this. If we talk quickly about the scale, so as per the engineering blog, the scale mentioned here is 1.2 billion settlements per month. It's quite a huge number. If we talk about the money, or like the cash is which is being transferred between the different PSPs or the banks, banking entities, which is 130 billion dollars. So it's quite huge, right? And then if we talk about PSPs, so it use combination of 50 PSPs, which is again a huge number. So like if we will like we will later on talk about the design, that the data which is received from these PSPs can heavily vary from PSP to PSP. So if there are 50 PSPs which Uber is integrated with, so there is a lot of complexities involved when they are consuming those events from the PSPs of the settlements. Cool. Now let's move forward with the requirements. We are clear with the basic sentiments of the problem, what a transaction mean, what a settlement mean, what one thing is reconciliation. Okay, so we missed this term reconciliation, which is like this system is basically a reconciliation system when we say settlement. So the settlement is done, right? Now when the settlement is done, uh, so think of, like we took that example, right? That Mandeep is a user, he's using Uber, and then we have a Razorpay. Okay, so whenever I am creating that payment entry is created in the Uber system, okay, with, let's say, transaction ID 1. So let's quickly take this example, that you have your Mandeep, okay, and then we have Uber as in between, and then we have Razorpay. Okay, it converted to rap. But yeah, so Mandeep transferred some amount, let's say 100 rupees. Okay, and then it is passed to Razorpay. At this moment of time, the Uber creates a transaction ID in itself. This autocorrect is but yeah, Uber creates a Uber transaction ID in its system, and then it forwards the codes to Razorpay system that deducts the particular amount from Mandeep's account. Okay, so at this time, Razorpay has 100 rupees in their account. Okay, now in this scenario, once the Razorpay has that amount, Razorpay sends a event to Uber that I have received the amount. Cool, I have received the amount. Now in this case, once the amount is received, uh, it marks that the amount is received by the Razorpay, and then it will be settled later on. Cool. Now once this amount, and let's say this is Uber transaction ID, and there is, as we also said, there is a unique transaction ID as well. So in case of Razorpay, it's Razorpay order ID. I have to disable this autocorrect and then we have payment ID. So once you receive this amount, you will receive a callback that yeah, this amount is credited in my account. Cool. Once this is done, you can say that the transaction will be settled after t+1 or t+2. You can be sure of that. Now this is the example we took, like you received the real-time events here from the Razorpay. In one of the PSP or like anything, you do not receive any events, so that transaction will be in hold. And after the settlement is done, like at the end of the day or after 2 days, you will get to know that what happened with this particular transaction. So if we talk about the requirements, we can receive two type of ingestion, basically two ingestion streams basically. Okay, so we have two ingestion streams from the backend. One is that you have your events which are being published by the systems. Okay, so events is one thing. Apart from events, you can have the files, settlement files, which are being there. Cool. Now let me quickly settle my monitor. Yeah, now I am comfortable. So event is one thing. Now there can be different events which this reconciliation system will consume. Another thing is the system will consume the files. Okay, this is the basically the entry points. How will I receive the events and then or the data, so that I can further process it to do the settlement and reconciliation of the transactions. So if we talk about the different types of events, you have Uber initiated events, which is initiated by the Uber system. Then you have ride initiated events. This is basically kind of chargeback events. Let's say if there are any disputes which are being raised, so yeah, this will be handled by here. Then we have PSP initiated events. PSP initiated events can have multiple information, such as like trip fees, what is the actual fees which is associated, non-trip fees such as gateway fees or card network fees. This can be like you don't have to have a I mean singular mapping to the events. It could be possible that you receive a singular event in combination to, let's say, 100 transactions are being carried on, and for these 100 transactions you have to pay 10 rupees of amount. There are different taxes. Then payment verification, as in like let's say the payment is authenticated or payment is validated. Once that is done, and this is you like whatever the transaction goes through, right? We took this example from like the amount is transferred from Mandeep to Uber, right? And then Razorpay is the intermediate entity. So whenever I am doing a transaction via Razorpay, like there are certain steps, right? You go to that page, you selected UPI, then you entered MPIN. So like as and when you are doing anything, like let's say you selected UPI and then went ahead, so you will receive a processing event of this particular transaction. Then let's say you enter the MPIN. Okay, once the MPIN is authorized, then you will get a authenticated event. Okay, once the payment is completely done or successful, you will receive a successful event. Or let's say if the payment is failed, let's say you entered wrong MPIN. Okay, so in that case you will receive failure event. So those are the events which the system will receive in case of PSP. uh, Another thing is we will receive the files, as I mentioned. So generally how different banking partners works is they share the files with the concerned systems, and then we will have to consume the files in our system to further settle those transactions. And if there are files, so One complexity is that there are different banking entities which we are interacting with. We mentioned that we have 50 different PSPs in case of Uber we are integrated with. So in this scenario, what is happening is that uh, the complexity rises, right? Now, file format is one thing. Like there are different file formats. Delivery mechanism is another thing. Like one of the system is delivering it via API, and the system is, let's say, they upload to the SFTP server and then we have to download from there. Another thing could be that they upload it to their S3 bucket or like any of other blob storage where you have to download from there. So multiple mechanisms. Data format in files. So let's say date format. Some uses DD, MM, YYYA, but other one uses years before in the date, or some uses, let's say, like UTC time zone. Some uses IST time zone. So you have to figure out all those stuff when you are consuming those files. There can be duplicate entries. Another thing is there can be duplicate entries is when you are reconciling these files. Whenever the reconciliation happen, if there are any duplicate entries, you have to figure out those missing or wrong reference. So we mentioned that we will settle the transaction or we will reconcile the transaction based on a unique transaction reference, and if that's missing or if it's wrong, then it's a problem. So we will need that. Net amount is not zero. So like whenever we say a settlement, right? Settlement is basically that user made a payment of 100 rupees. Okay. So Uber, in short, might not receive the entire 100 amount. Okay, let's say some of the amount is deducted by the Razorpay, but the net amount should be zero. Net amount should be zero. So 100 is debited from the user account, and if you combine the deduction from Razorpay plus the amount received by Uber, it should be zero if you separate them. Uh, this one is that if there is large one-off transaction. So I mentioned that the amount from Razorpay to Uber is not transferred one to one. Okay, a single transaction is made with all the amount which is for a specific day. So that's a huge amount. Let's say it's $10 million. So you have to monitor that transaction specifically so that and the nature of the transaction or the state of the transaction is same in all the banking entities involved. Cool. Now let's move forward with the design. So our architecture of the system is divided into three components. Basically, there are four. Two components are combined in the third one. Yeah. So this is the design. Basically, it was reformatted somehow. So as I mentioned, right, there are three systems which are related to this architecture. Okay, so first one is the feed ingestion service. Feed ingestion service basically downloads the files from the PSPs. Okay, you parse that file, you normalize that file to a standard format, which your system will then consume it further. So that, like this, you can say this is the first layer of it, and then puts or presents that file into a beautiful format so that it can be easily consumed or processed later on. Okay, so this is the work of the ingestion service. There are different delivery mechanisms, as we mentioned already. You consume those files and then you create a beautiful normalized view and then put it into a blob storage. Feed processor service consumes that file, process that file in batches, and then further move that to reconciliation system, which again takes some actions. We will again about this each of the components in details. So basically, in case of reconciliation, you will uh, every event which is generated from the file, it will reconcile against the payment which is already present in our system. Okay, once that is done, then your accounting system kicks in where you generate a transaction event basically, depending on like which can be further consumed by the downstream systems, and finally it is saved to the accounting ledger for any of the historical purposes or like audit trails. Cool. So first of the component is our feed. What is the name? Feed ingestion service. Cool. So in case of feed ingestion service, you receive the files on periodic basis. Okay, so when I say on periodic basis, so that means that this system runs on runs periodically. So basis you have a cron scheduler which triggers the system that go to this and like specific delivery mechanism and then download that file. Once you have this file, you start with the ingestion process. Yeah, I mean the initial processing part. Okay, so what you do is, as part of the like what all details you will do is, you download the file from PSP, okay, via different delivery mechanisms. Once that is done, you upload this file to your own blob storage, okay, and definitely you will maintain the metadata in your system. Once that is done, what you do is you uh, create a PSP event out of this file. Okay, so as I mentioned, you create a normalized version from this file. So what you do is, let's say one example we talked about was date format. Okay, if we quickly see the example of PSP event, so here is the PSP event. So every single file will have multiple transactions which you have to settle for. Okay, it's not like that you receive a single transaction in a single file. There can be multiple transactions, there can be single as well, but yeah, talking about the scale which we are concerned about, there are multiple transactions in a single file. So what you do is you create multiple events out of it. So once you do the normalization, you upload that file back to the blob storage. Okay, and this is one of the event, like how this normalization is done, or how a PSP event is created out of this. So this is one of the sample, right? Uh, and then once you have that properly modeled out, then it can be further consumed by your further components. So you saved the normalized file to blob storage, you publish the event to Kafka. Now your second component kicks in. In case of feed processor service, you receive the PSP event, and as we mentioned, the multiple events are batched together. Okay, multiple events are batched together, and then they are processed in parallel. Just because we mentioned as per our scale, right? The scale is huge, so just to ensure that our system like process these events in a latency sensitive way, or like it's not taking too much time basically, and then we have a high throughput of the system. uh, Parallel processing is done, and then if anything goes wrong, the events are published back to the DLQ is basically your dead letter queue for further debugging, or we have an automated mechanism in place which looks into those events which are pushed into the DLQ. Like if there is actually something wrong with the event, like let's say there is some missing information, or in some scenarios, let's say there is some internal bug in our code, which if it is fixed, then the event can be reprocessed. Okay, so it can be used for both of the purposes. So in case of your we talked about feed ingestion service, it normalizes the file, it pushes to the blob storage, we consume the file from blob storage, you do the batching, and then you again invoke your feed processor service. Now in case of feed processor service, that's where the actual settlement process kicks in. Like till this point, we are doing the initial pre-processing kind of things to actually consume this event. Okay, so feed processor not the feed processor service, this reconciliation service. Let me pull this diagram below if it comes down. Okay, so yeah, so this is our reconciliation and accounting service. Now, like when we started our discussion, we mentioned that there are events which are published from the Uber payment system. Okay, and then there are files which you received from the settlement system, and then you have to combine these two to actually carry out the settlement. Cool. Now you received this event, this is your events, and then you put up. So in cache, you basically maintain what is the transaction reference and what is the trip ID. Okay, so in the cache, this is the your event from your payments platform, like internal payment platform, that this is the transaction reference and this is the trip ID. Now once you consume the PSP event, okay, once you consume the PSP event, from PSP event you will figure out the transaction reference. Okay, so for transaction reference you will get the trip ID from here, because in the settlement file you are not getting the trip ID, and in the end you have to map all these transactions to the trips, right? So to gather all these informations to, or you can say to clutch or to stick all these informations together, club all these information together, you use this mechanism. Okay, cool. So going through the entire flow, reconciliation system is responsible for. So this we already covered, that your Uber platform, so Uber payment platform is publishing the event, and then you finally stick together the PSP event and the trip ID. Cool. Once that is done, once that is done, uh, the data is reconciled. Okay. So whenever the reconciliation is done, uh, a financial event is generated. Now, whenever I say a financial event, basically a financial event contains lot of information. Okay, uh, and when I say lot of information, we mentioned one of the source as this Uber payments platform. Okay, now there can be other systems as well. Let's say there are real time events, or there are other information which are clubbed together. So this financial event contains all the information which is later on used by the accounting engine or accounting component which we have in our system. Okay, so, and as per the event, financial event can be your like there are different events as well which are mentioned in the diagram mentioned here. So it was somewhere something similar to, let's say, assets, liabilities, profit and loss, and all those things. Okay, so you receive that event, you categorize that event into specific category, and once that is done, it is consumed by the accounting service. Now this accounting system has different rules configured, okay, depending on the event which you have. So since you mentioned that there are multiple event types which are there, this accounting system, what it will do, it has different rule sets which are present. Okay, and as per these rule sets, the accounting engine will kick in those rules, or like basically run those rules to figure out if there is anything wrong. Okay, it basically carries out the evaluation. You receive the event, you fetch the rule specific to this event, you run the evaluation, and then you say yeah, success or failure. Okay, basically. And once the validation is done, you save that transaction event to the accounting ledger, which we earlier mentioned, right, in the first diagram here, this accounting ledger. So it is saved to this accounting ledger, and then it is also pushed back to Kafka if any of the downstream systems are interested in this. So this is all for today's video. I hope you like, there are a lot of payments details in this architecture. So if you have earlier worked with the payment system, it will be easy to understand. If not, uh, I mean, you can read the blog and you can view the video again, and it will definitely should be helpful in your designing the systems journey. So stay tuned. I will try to make more videos from more such engineering blogs. Till then, stay safe. Tata. Bye bye.